such unnaturally white teeth, but maybe around 0.5. I think that looks pretty good. So then we can, okay, you'll see that we still have these marching ants from when we selected. So we can just go to select and then none. And when I zoom out, ta-da, we've got some fairly white teeth. One thing that I wanted to mention is that if we were uploading this to social media, for example, we would want to save it as a file that can be used by social media. Normally, when we go to File and then Save, GIMP automatically saves it as an XCF file. And XCF files are great. They maintain layers. They maintain a lot of different things that you may want to edit in the future. But XCF files aren't going to be accepted by any social media sites. So instead of saving, cancel, if this is our final image and this is how we want to upload it, then we would go to Save As. And here, we should be able to. Nope. Export as, there we go. If we select export as, it allows us to export as a JPEG file, which should be accepted by your social media sites or wherever you want to save this. JPEGs are fairly universal. So we could just hit export, replace. It asks us how good the quality we want it to be. So we want it to be high quality. We don't want to lose anything. It asks us a bunch of other options, but I find that usually the default is just fine. And I'll hit export and it has been saved. Okay. So moving on to blemishes.
Hey, Anna.
Yes.
Would you be able to show how the lasso tool works again? Maybe just on one tooth?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm going to zoom in by using the control key and using the scroll wheel on my mouse. And I'm going to select the lasso tool. Under mode, there's different options in the options toolbar. So the first one that's usually default is replace the current selection. So if we hold down the mouse key and start drawing around the tooth, we can see where that yellow circle is. We want to make sure that we go back to that yellow circle. We start getting marching ants, and to commit to this selection, we want to hit the enter key. However, if we wanted to add another tooth to this selection, what I would want to do is I would want to make sure to add to the current selection by holding down either the shift key or selecting this mode. Did that help clear things up?
It sure did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to blemishes. We are going to File, Open, and we are going to open our blemish file. So in order to get rid of blemishes, we have to select an area of the face that is unblemished and has a similar skin tone, and then stamp it onto the blemish. So we are going to be using the clone tool here. Now the clone tool is a little tricky. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. The clone tool, you'll see if I just try clicking on something, there's a little circle with a cross going through it, saying that I can't do that. What GIMP wants me to do first is to identify an area that I want to copy, and then I'll paste it over this blemish. So I think that somewhere here is good enough. You'll see I control clicked, and you'll see kind of a target circle as well as the circle that you're moving around with your mouse. So once you have that, you can start painting over it. and that blemish is gone. So we can zoom out again, zoom back in. You'll see that some blemishes are larger than our brush. So in order to increase the size of my brush, I can go to the options bar and increase that size to something a little bit bigger. Okay. And maybe control click here. And erase that. I'm going to control click again here and erase these.
Would you be able to start from the top again and show how you are like selecting the area? I think you're just applying the brush diameter, right? Like you're not necessarily selecting the area.
Right, so when I'm control clicking to select my area, I'm just holding down the control key on my keyboard and clicking with my mouse. And that's the target area that GIMP is going to copy. So maybe I want to control click this area because it looks a little bit darker here. And then once I'm happy with my selection, I'm starting to click in the area that I want to erase essentially, or stamp over, because this is the clone tool. So I'm control clicking here. And anytime that I'm control clicking, that selection circle goes all the way around the area that I'm copy and pasting. And I'm pasting it onto the new area. So it's not an exact science. It's kind of your best judgment as far as what area you think will work best. I always try to keep in mind the skin tone and the shadows and highlights on the skin. Oh. Can move over. So I'm control clicking again. The area that I'm copying is circled, and then I'm just clicking in the destination. Did that explain things, Hannah?
Yes.
Okay. So on and so forth. I think that you get the idea. We could continue going around his face and get rid of all of the blemishes. But I think now that we've kind of explored the clone tool a little bit, there's a lot other tools that I want to show off to you as far as GIMP goes. So we are just going to keep this open and move on to the next. So under File, Open, we are now going to work with our third image, which is filters. It's an image of a flower, and I really like this flower because it's a very simple shape for us to try to isolate from the background. What I really like doing with some images is I like leaving a portion of them color and then the rest of it black and white. Or you can do multiple other effects to it. Instead of using the Lasso tool, the free select tool this time, I'm going to use the fuzzy select tool, which kind of looks like a stick with a star on it. And theoretically in the modes, you might have replace current selection selected. In the modes, we want to make sure that we add to the current selection. Because when we click on our flower, you'll see a bunch of marching ants. It kind of selected this light blue color for us, but we want the even lighter blue, and we also want the darker blue as well. So I'm just clicking and dragging now. And you'll see it did a decent job, but it also got some yellow here. So now I want to subtract from the current selection and kind of click and drag this yellow bit right there until what I've got is this nice blue flower selected. You can see here there's some marching ants that indicate that this darker blue wasn't selected. And I actually don't want this selected either. So I'm going to go back to my free select tool, and I'm going to add this part to the selection, but subtract this stem. So adding to the selection, I'm going to hit enter to commit to that selection. And then I'm going to subtract this stem and hit enter to commit. And now all that we have selected is just the blue flower. So I'm going to zoom back out. And there's a lot of different things that we can do. In color, we can open up the color balance and see what this image would look like if we made it a little bit more cyan. Actually, no, sorry, I lied. We are not going to do that because right now the flower is selected. So turning the flower more cyan doesn't really make sense. It's already very bright blue. What I want to do is see what the background looks like. So under select, I skipped this step earlier. I'm going to go to invert. And now you'll see marching ants around the border and around the flower. It's kind of hard to tell, but the background is what's selected right now. And now when I go to colors and color balance, when I make the background more cyan, you can see it starts to take on a bit more of a greenish, almost alien effect, slightly glowing. We can see what the background looks like if it were a bit more red, a bit more magenta. And we can play with these levels as much as we want. We can also play around with the hue saturation. So you can select a color to adjust. So in this case, yellow. And we can see what happens when that yellow hue is turned red, or when it's gone even further to a kind of purpley background. So all of the yellow in this image, you can see where it's trying to get these oranges to, is turned purple by this. I don't want to do that. We can also colorize. So colorize right here, down on the bottom. Here we can select a color that we want the background to primarily be. So if I wanted the rest of the photo to look blue, as well as the flower, then I could select a blue, or maybe a bit more of an orange. You'll see everything is maintaining the shades of black and white, but it's changing the color. As I mentioned before, I typically like to make the backgrounds black and white. So we're just going to go to saturation again. And for this, I'm going to take it all the way back down to 0 to desaturate the background. And it looks like a nice pop of color, very artistic in my opinion. Of course, you could saturate the photo even more and see what it looks like with some brighter colors if you'd like that as well. I actually kind of like that. Okay. In the end, we can select none and see what our image looks like. And then again, we would want to file export as, or in this case, I'm going to save the XCF file. Okay, there are other options as well. So I'm going to use my fuzzy select tool to reselect my flower. And I'm going to add to selection every time I click. So I'm just clicking and dragging over the blues. Again, it didn't select the part of the inside of the flower, and it did select the stem, but I'm not too worried about that right now. we're going to go to select and then invert. And then under filters, we can either blur out the background more, we can add some noise. There's some artistic effects as well, where you might want to see what it looks like, similar distortion caused by rectangular glass tiles. You can do a lot of these different effects. Let's try Van Gogh. I don't think that we have a preview available for this, but I'm trying to see what it would look like. I don't think that this was probably the best image for a Van Gogh effect. I think if you had a bit more lines, you would see a bit bigger of a difference. But I do encourage you to take a look at these filters, play around with them. There's some really, really cool effects that you can add just by using a few clicks of your mouse. Okay. I'm going to save this again, and then I'm going to open our green screen. Now, I'm sure you've figured out that you can select pretty much anything in GIMP. We've selected teeth by hand drawing ourselves. We've selected the flower by using the fuzzy select tool. Right now, we are going to select all of the green color in this photo. So we are going to select by color. And that tool was under the fuzzy select tool. It was grouped with it. So I just held down my mouse key and let go when I was hovering over select by color. And under mode, I want to make sure that I am adding to the current selection. So we're just going to want to click and drag a little bit. I think I clicked and dragged too much. And you can see it's starting to select all of the greens. I'm just going to keep making these little adjustments. Okay, this photo is not perfect. The issue, I think, is primarily coming from the fact that there's some very big white spots in the green. So a lot of the other white, like his pants, is also being selected. We do not want to add that, so I'm going to try to deselect his pants. And I think that worked out pretty well. I can still see some lines here. I think that I'm going to zoom in by using the control key and my scroll wheel. And this time I'm going to use the free select tool to subtract from selection, because right now we're selecting all of the green and we want the man unselected. So I'm just trying to draw a border as well as I can around the edge of his pants. And then pressing enter to commit to that selection. And we can do even more. Okay. You'll see with green screens, if you ever take a picture on a green screen, there's two colors I would recommend that you don't really wear. I would recommend you don't wear green because then you'll be part of the green screen. And I also recommend that you don't wear white. White tends to get a lot of light bouncing off on it. And if there's a green background, you'll see the green kind of jumped onto his pants as well. Even though they are perfectly white pants, that's just how the shading works with white. So we've got a little bit of a challenge, but we can overcome it. I have no doubts. Other than that, it looks pretty good. I'm making sure that my marching ants are all around him. Okay, but now what I want to do is I want to create a new layer and have this man on the new layer. However, right now what we have selected is the green background. So we'll want to go to select and then invert again. And now the marching ants are just around him and they're not around the background. So we selected the green and then we inverted the selection to everything except for the green that we had selected, which is just this man. We are going to go to edit, copy, and then go back to edit and paste. You'll see in the layers panel that now we have a floating selection, a pasted layer. To make this layer permanent, what we're going to want to do is we are going to make sure that it's selected in our layers panel. And then in layers, go to new layer. And there you see we still have our pasted layer. Layers, I should have explained earlier, are a little bit like transparencies. They kind of dictate what's visible and what's not visible. You can have a brush stroke on one layer and then using these little eye icons next to the layers, you can make the layer completely invisible. So I can see here that we didn't quite get all of the green and we'll want to probably erase some of that. So it's a good time for the eraser tool, I think. And we can just erase that circle and erase this as well. That checkerboard pattern indicates that our layer is invisible. So we are on the right track. However, I'm still a little worried about how green his pants look just because of that background. So what we're going to do is we are going to fix that with a little bit of GIMP magic. So we have a little bit of a green border, and then you can also see around his hands, a little bit around his face, there's a little bit of green there. So what I want to do is I want to make my brush much smaller. That's better. And I'm going to move this. Move it back here. Okay. And what we are going to do is we are going to use the color picker tool, which looks like this eyedropper right here. And we are going to select a color. So for this section, I want to use this kind of flesh tone of his hands. Ooh, zoomed in a little too much. But I selected that color and you can see that color, that kind of pink peachy color showed up here in my tool options. And when I select my brush, it's the same tool. However, if I just start painting, that doesn't look right. It doesn't look normal. So what we're going to do instead is right now our paintbrush mode is set to normal. We are going to do color. I guess color erase. And no, that is not what I wanted to do. Color, color, color. There's a lot of different options for color. So hue, saturation, lightness color, and then I think luminance and chroma color. I think we want the hue, saturation, lightness color. And when we select it, you'll see that it painted over in ways that we did not quite want. Let's try this Lumichroma color. And it's still giving us that border. Lovely. For those of you who don't know, GIMP sometimes updates. So I am used to a slightly older version of GIMP. This is version 2.10.30. And it looks like they changed my regular color, and that's fine. What we can do is we can try soft light. Oh, you know what I think I want to do? Okay, so under layer right now, we've got our pasted layer, and there's different options to lock things. So right now I can lock the alpha channel, which means that everything that's transparent stays transparent and everything that's visible stays visible. So if I lock the alpha channel, now we can see when I'm painting over the edge, it stays invisible. So let's try going back to our HSL color. There we go. That's what I wanted. So in order to fix that, again, I made sure that I hovered over my pasted layer and I locked the alpha channel to make sure that everything that's currently transparent stays transparent. You'll see there's a little bit of a green tinge there. So I'm going to go back to my color picker tool, select that darker brown, go back to my paintbrush tool, and then kind of color over where it was green. There's a bit of green everywhere, unfortunately. So we can get as precise as we want to with this. But I think you kind of get the idea. There's a lot of different paintbrush modes that you saw. And we can get a lot of different results from using these paintbrush modes. So I'm going to make that blue. It's not quite the same blue, but I hope you'll forgive me. This green right here is what I really wanted to get rid of. So I'm going to use my color picker tool again, select this kind of beige white of his pants. And have that be what's selected. So you'll see, depending on what color you choose with your color picker tool, it either has more of a brown shadow or kind of pinky peachy shadow. And so on and so forth. I'm not going to worry too much about his pants now. I think that you get the application of the color tool and the brush tool. So now that we've got him painted, or as close to color as we want, we can add him to a background. I'm going to go to File and then Open as Layers. And here you can see I've got either a landscape inside, so he can be inside a building, or landscape outside. I'm going to have him be outside, I think, today. But depending on how we deal with the layers, he can be either or. So My layer for the landscape is much smaller than he is. We will want to make this layer much bigger, and we'll also want to drag it down underneath our man so that he is in front of the background. We can make the background bigger by using the Unified Transform tool. And by clicking on it, you'll see that it's temporarily over the man. Don't worry too much about that. I'm just going to use these boxes on the top and bottom to make sure that my image is bigger than the man. And then you'll want to make sure that you transform here in this dialog box. And now we can see our man is standing kind of on these steps. We can, of course, move this layer a little bit so that he's standing maybe on these steps. What looks a bit more natural? I'm not sure at this point. But we can use the move tool to move that layer. So again, we just went to File, Open as Layers, and now we can put him inside. You'll see once again that the background was much smaller than we intended it to be. So we can use the Unified Transform tool to select that. Use these squares on the top and bottom to make the image bigger. Hit Transform. And now he's inside a building. We might want to make our man smaller as well. So I'm going to use our Unified Transform tool this time on him to make him a reasonable size. And by clicking on these eye icons, he can be immediately transported from inside or outside. Okay. Are there any questions in the chat, Hannah?
So far, no, but I will keep you posted.
Okay. These layers, I mentioned before, GIMP has that XCF file. I'm going to save this as that XCF file. And then I'm going to close out of it. Discard changes, close out. What I want to do now is open, and you'll see we have the green screen XCF file. So normally when you open a JPEG file, it is the only layer that's available, but here you can see the XCF file. We're able to keep editing everything that was on our separate layers. We can still make changes, and maybe we decide that we want him inside after all before we export. So honestly, that brings us to the end of basics of GIMP. I do want to encourage you to go to our Plano Public Library website. If you want more tutorials for GIMP, you can go to Library, and when you hover over it, there should be a pop-up box that shows up, and you can either click on Research and Learn right here, or you can scroll down a little bit further to these buttons, including the one that says Research and Learn. This takes you to all of our different databases. We will click on Business and Career in order to open up LinkedIn Learning. You can see it takes us to a page where we can get started and log in with our library card and PIN number. Whoops. And once we're logged in, we can search for GIMP specifically in the search bar. So GIMP. You'll see there's 162 results for GIMP. There's GIMP Essential Training by Mike Rankin. I would highly recommend this course. It's 5 hours and 10 minutes, but it goes by in the flash of an eye. If you click on a course, you'll see different contents on the left. So now that we've kind of gotten started, you might kind of want to skip the get started section. But if you want to learn more about selection tools, you can select on any of these and it will open up a video tutorial, or you can work more with layers and understand layers a little bit better. You can work with masks, which are something that I didn't talk about, or work with any of these wonderful learning dialogues. At the very end of the class, as you exit, I believe there should be a survey that pops up in your browser. If you could fill that out and let us know what we did well, what we could improve on. It really helps us out a lot and helps us to continue making programs that are applicable to you and things that you want to see from the library. Thank you so much for attending.